In his bedroom, by the door, he'd piled pillows as high up the door jambs as he could and pillows along the bottom. So if somebody was outside eavesdropping, it would make it harder for them.
Goedenavond, welkom bij Panorama. Vandaag en de 2 volgende weken brengen we het tenenkrullend verhaal van de Amerikaanse inlichtingendienst NSA, bekend en berucht sinds Edward Snowden duizenden geheime documenten naar buiten bracht. Het verhaal begint op 11 september 2001, de dag dat de Twin Towers worden aangevallen. In de kantoren van het National Security Agency, NSA, kijken ze met het schaamrood op de kaken naar de beelden. Waarom heeft de inlichtingendienst met al zijn mensen en middelen die aanvallen niet zien aankomen? Hoe hebben ze dit kunnen missen? Voor de top van de NSA is het snel duidelijk. Ze willen al wie op Amerikaanse bodem verblijft kunnen bespioneren, verdacht of niet verdacht. In het grootste geheim en met de zegen van president Bush werkt de NSA een nieuw spionageprogramma uit. Kijkt u mee naar deel 1 van The United States of Secrets.
Het grootste lek van regeringsgeheimen begint in december 2012 met een e-mail aan een journalist in Rio de Janeiro.
Glenn Greenwald, one of the world's busiest journalists, is sitting in his home in Rio, and he sees an email from someone he doesn't know. It's not a friend, it's not his mum, and it just says, I've got some stuff you might be interested in.
He didn't use his name, and he said very cryptically and very vaguely that he had information that he wanted to discuss with me, but could only do so if I were to install encryption.
Greenwald schrijft al jaren columns voor The Guardian. Hij ligt niet wakker van de mail.
99% of the time it ends up that they're crazy or delusional or the story is just not very good.
And this guy or girl, we don't know who it is persistent. So a few days later, emails again and says, look, Glenn, can you do this thing? And Glenn still doesn't do it. This attempt basically to leak all of these secrets initially just goes straight into the sand.
De bron probeert het nu in Berlijn. Al snel wisselt hij e-mails uit met de Amerikaanse documentairemaakster Laura Poitras.
She'd been in contact for over a month with a mysterious source who had reached out to her using her encryption key and using anonymous channels and said he had a big story for her.
New York, enkele weken later. Poitras heeft een afspraak met de journalist Barton Gellman, een expert in nationale veiligheid.
This was something she wanted to be exceptionally careful about. We agreed on a cafe to meet at, and we also, I think, both understood that when we got there, we'd move to someplace else.
Ze vraagt hem om de geloofwaardigheid van haar bron te checken.
Her source, who became also my source, needed to take very special precautions in the usual NSA style, and so he called me Brass Banner, and he called himself Virax, which means truth teller in Latin.
In zijn zorgvuldig gecodeerde boodschappen belooft Virax een gigantische primeur. Maar hij heeft ook een waarschuwing.
He believed he was risking his freedom and possibly his life. And he warned me as well that if the U.S. intelligence community believed that by getting rid of me, they could prevent this story from happening, he said that my life would be at risk.
Eind mei verrast Virax Gellman en Poitras opeens met een uitnodiging.
He said, your destination is Hong Kong.
Poitras wil gaan, maar Gellman ziet te veel op tegen een geheime ontmoeting in een land als China. Iemand anders zal Poitras vergezellen. Die lente komt Glenn Greenwald naar New York voor een toespraak.
And we met that night in my hotel in the lobby, and she showed me these emails that she had been exchanging with this person who was claiming that he was a national security state insider with access to very sensitive information that he believed to be very incriminating, and stated very definitively that he wanted to turn it over to her and to me.
Greenwald besluit om mee te gaan.
We all knew that this was incredibly risky and uncertain, but the story had to be reported.
In juni rijden Poitras en Greenwald naar het vliegveld.
I think they're kind of quite excited, but there's also a sort of feeling that maybe this is just the most terrific hoax.
Ook Ewan McCaskill gaat mee, een veteraan van The Guardian.
At the time, I didn't think it was for real, didn't take it that seriously, and thought it was a slightly obscure story.
Aan boord vindt Poitras het veilig genoeg om Greenwald iets te laten zien wat Verax haar gestuurd heeft.
That's kind of quite a moment. They're in a secure space, and so Laura creeps forward to go and see Glenn.
Laura whips out this thumb drive and in a very sort of almost mischievous way says, you know, guess what this is, and told me that she had just received a fairly large archive of documents.
They kind of can't control their excitement because this is clearly the biggest story that anyone's worked on since the Pentagon Papers in the 1970s.
And I didn't sleep 1 second for the next 16 hours because the adrenaline made that impossible to do, because I not only saw the magnitude of the documents, just the sheer quantity, the fact that we had in our possession thousands, not dozens or hundreds, but many thousands of top secret NSA documents that were about a wide range of surveillance activities that came directly from some of the most sensitive areas of the agency.
I could see out of the corner of my eye Glenn with the light on throughout this 13-hour flight, reading on his laptop all the time, Laura coming to see him, them having chats, and Glenn getting more and more excited.
We essentially couldn't believe what it was that we had, and that was really the first time I think I fully understood that this was going to be unlike any other story really ever in American journalism or politics.
In Hongkong gaan de 3 reisgenoten naar een hotel in Kowloon.
Snowden's instructions to Glenn and Laura are like a kind of magical mystery tour crossed with something out of John le Carré. He tells them to go to a hotel, the Mirror Hotel in Hong Kong, and says that he will meet them in a less trafficked part of the hotel next to a shopping mall by a bench and a crocodile.
We had still no idea of who he was, what his age was, what his race was. We knew nothing about him demographically at all. And so the plan that he picked was that he would be holding a Rubik's Cube in his hand so that when he entered the room, we would immediately know who he was.
All of a sudden, this guy comes past with a Rubik's Cube, scramble up, which is part of the kind of code. But the man before them is not what they expected. They expected some grizzled CIA veteran wearing a blue blazer, maybe with a bit of dandruff, with a tie, receding grey hair, and they get this callow, sort of thin-limbed student type who looks as if he's just out of high school, and he is their source. And he's supposedly the guy who's got the crown jewels.
When this 29-year-old kid who looked a lot younger shows up, it was extremely disorienting and introduced a real awkwardness to our interaction and kind of a shock.
Edward Snowden neemt hen mee naar zijn kamer.
In his bedroom, by the door, he'd piled pillows as high up the door jambs as he could, and pillows along the bottom. So if somebody was outside eavesdropping, it would make it harder for them.
There was always this kind of uncertainty, one might even say danger, hovering over the room, especially for the first few days, because we didn't know what the NSA knew about what he was doing. So we thought it was very possible that the door could be barged down at any moment and someone could enter to arrest Snowden.
Dagenlang horen ze Snowden uit. Dan stuurt Ewan McCaskill een sms naar zijn redacteur in New York, Janine Gibson.
Janine knew that I liked Guinness, so she said, if Snowden is for real, send me a message and just say the Guinness is good. And I was 100% sure that Snowden and the documents were for real. I sent a message to Janine saying the Guinness is good.
De documenten van Snowden vertellen een gedetailleerd verhaal over een van de best bewaakte geheimen van de Amerikaanse regering. Het stond bekend als The Program. The Program begint op 11 september 2001 in Fort Meade in Maryland. Hier zetelt de NSA.
Does it look like September or what? What a gorgeous day.
I'm in my office. Remember the day? Brilliantly clear day, clear blue skies.
I was in his suite waiting for a meeting, and we had started up the hallway to his office when the first plane hit the tower.
My executive assistant, a young woman, came in and said, "Hey, we got reports of a plane hitting the World Trade Center," and like 300 million other Americans, I thought, wow, small plane, sport plane, accident, too bad.
That looks like a second plane. That just exploded.
My poor security chief didn't even have a chance to speak. I just turned to him and said, "All non-essential personnel out of here now."
Oh my goodness, there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon.
Everybody had the TV on because the TV is where the news was. It wasn't coming out of NSA's computers. It was on the TV because we had missed the entire event.
It was a enormous shock that you have this huge agency set up to prevent a surprise attack, and they learn about it on a $300 television set tuned to CNN in the director's office.
In paniek wordt het Witte Huis bijna volledig geëvacueerd.
Secret Service bursts into the vice president's office, basically frog marches him by one arm and the seat of his pants into this deep underground shelter that was built to withstand nuclear war.
Cheney geeft zijn advocaat David Addington opdracht om alles voor te bereiden voor een optreden van de president als opperbevelhebber.
David Addington, principally the vice president, was interested in ensuring that the president's constitutional authority was used to its fullest.
Cheney says, "I want you to tell me what powers we're going to need, the president's going to need, that he doesn't already have to respond to this calamity."
And they decide that they're going to push every boundary they have. Addington at one point says, we're going to push and push and push until some larger force makes us stop.
Tours of the Capitol will be canceled indefinitely.
Op 12 september heerst er een sombere stemming bij de NSA.
We began soul searching almost immediately. We all felt like a great wrong had been done and that we were all somewhat, if not all, culpable.
A fate which will live in infamy.
You have to remember that NSA was created after World War II to prevent another surprise attack. That was the whole raison d'etre for NSA. Pearl Harbor, we don't want another Pearl Harbor.
Information that more people involved in the plot to remain in the United States.
Immediately we began to wonder what we had done wrong. Why did we miss the boat? What didn't we detect that we should have detected?
Na de aanslagen stelt de NSA zichzelf fundamentele vragen. Hoe hebben ze dit over het hoofd kunnen zien?
It was a very cautious agency. It's an agency that is fighting with one hand tied behind its back out of a fear of a political backlash by being too aggressive.
The president now at the door.
Onder president Nixon
A final wave.
heeft de NSA Amerikanen bespioneerd.
Certainly appears to violate the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution.
Het congres reageert fel. Ruim 20 jaar verzamelt de dienst geen binnenlandse inlichtingen meer. Het is verboden om de NSA tegen Amerikanen in te zetten.
If you were an NSA analyst, this sort of legal regime was drilled into your head to the point where a lot of people said it's made the rules too restrictive and it's hampered the NSA's ability to detect terrorist plots.
Sommige medewerkers vinden dat de NSA de aanslagen had kunnen voorkomen als er minder restricties waren geweest.
I do believe it could have been prevented with revisions to the way we were permitted to operate before 9/11. Revisions that I tried to get the General Counsel to embrace and wouldn't. And couldn't. I tried to get them to make adjustments to how we were operating, how we were permitted to operate, and they wouldn't do it. I've felt this ever since it occurred. That over 3,000 people's lives were lost, and it's just a weight that I have been having trouble bearing. I'm sorry.
The toughest week for America since Japan bombed.
Washington wordt zich steeds bewuster van al zijn kwetsbare plekken.
We have to remember that, you know, we had terrorists living in this country for a number of months, and we didn't know about it. What else didn't we know? And so there was a great deal of concern about the fact that we not only could not connect the dots, we could not collect the dots.
CIA-directeur George Tenet wordt op het matje geroepen.
The director had a meeting with Vice President Cheney and his top aide, David Eddington, and he was asked, what can be done? What can be done that isn't being done?
9/11 made necessary a shift of policy.
Cheney says, in effect, to Tenet, make me a shopping list. Tell me what you want to do that we're not letting you do yet.
De CIA werkt al aan geheime operaties tegen Al-Qaeda. Tenet belt de NSA-baas.
George calls me and says, Mike, any more you can do? I said, George, no, not within my authorities, not within my current authorities. And he paused and said, that's not actually the question I asked you. Is there anything more you could do? I said, I'll get back to you.
Hayden heeft het begrepen en licht zijn medewerkers in. Weg met de fluwelen handschoenen. Kom met een agressief plan.
And they asked me, is there anything that we had that could have prevented 9/11?
Loomis heeft zijn antwoord klaar. Een toezicht op het internationale internetverkeer dat door de Verenigde Staten passeert.
The U.S. internet hubs handle so much of the worldwide internet traffic. So I said, let us allow collection between U.S. and foreign to U.S. against the terrorism problem.
Anderen binnen de dienst willen veel verder gaan.
What they propose to do is create a whole new surveillance program without warrants, trapping all sorts of information, taking advantage of the fact that modern communication trunk lines tend to come through the United States.
The idea of this program was you're looking for unknown conspirators, and the way they devised to do that was to look at everybody.
Dit is een idee waarmee Hayden bij Cheney kan aankomen. Hij gaat naar Washington om het voor te stellen. Het wordt zijn eerste overleg in de Oval Office.
Prior to 9/11, I don't think I knew General Hayden. I probably knew his name. I doubt that the president knew his name.
It's a very big change for the director of NSA to suddenly have all this attention from senior officials in the White House and so forth. And I'm sure it had a major impact on Hayden.
Na de briefing slaat de president zijn arm om generaal Hayden en noemt hem Mikey.
So I walk in to see the president. It's the president and the vice president in the room. Almost certainly Condi was there as the national security advisor. Andy Card would have been there.
Cheney suggests a question, and George Bush asks it. What would you like to do that you can't already do that would help prevent another 9/11?
Hayden schetst de program. Het zal gegevens verzamelen over het telefoon- en internetverkeer van honderden miljoenen Amerikanen en daarin verdachte contacten opsporen. Maar hij is bezorgd of dat wel legaal is.
And the first thing he says to me is, Mike, I understand your concerns, but there's some things we're going to have to do. And I think I have the authority to authorize you to do the things that you've outlined.
President says, go. I want you to go develop a program, come back to me. We got the lawyers working on it. But you have my order. We're going to do this.
Hayden beseft dat zijn voorstel controversieel is.
No president had authorized it prior to this time.
And Michael Hayden goes home after briefing the president and the vice president about his ideas for expanding surveillance, and he takes a walk with his wife.
And she said, what's on your mind? I said, well, we're going to go do something here. And I didn't go into any details. We're going to do something. One day it's going to be public. And when it gets public, it's going to be very controversial. And the people doing it are going to be swept into this thing. She said, huh? Is it the right thing to do? I said, yeah, I think so. She said, okay, we'll deal with that when it comes.
Op 4 oktober ondertekent George W. Bush het geheime presidentiële bevel voor de program.
That order is written by David Addington, the vice president's lawyer. It's not written by the president's lawyer. And this is not only unusual, but probably unique in the history of major U.S. intelligence operations, is written by the vice president's lawyer and stored in his own safe.
Addington heeft een kantoortje in het gebouw van het uitvoerend bureau.
This order is one of the most closely kept secrets of the Bush-Cheney administration for 4 years. It kept so secret that many people involved in national security inside the White House and the government don't know about it.
Addington brengt persoonlijk een kopie naar de NSA in Fort Meade.
He said, I'm coming out, I'll be there in about 30 minutes. Hand carried. This was very closely guarded that we were doing this. He comes onto the campus at Fort Meade, up to the top deck, and hands me the order.
Nu vraagt generaal Hayden de zegen van zijn advocaat, Robert Dietz.
I think he was concerned and wanted my view of whether this program was lawful. I spent a kind of sleepless night pondering the legality of it. This was a very hard call. It's a very hard call.
The NSA has a general counsel and about 100 lawyers. And they were told the president has signed it. It's been certified as lawful. And once all the signatures are there, that's it. We salute. We say, okay, it's lawful. We're going to go ahead.
In the intel world, if a president says to you, I need this in order to keep the American people safe, you need to try to figure out where that line is constitutionally and march right up to it.
Ook 2 andere NSA-advocaten geven hun toestemming.
We came to the conclusion independently, but consistently, that there was no doubt in our mind that it was a legitimate use of the president's Article 2 authority.
Meer heeft generaal Hayden niet nodig. Het gezag van de president als opperbevelhebber, volgens artikel 2.
I have my 3 good friends here who have been my guardian angels on these things since I became director, saying, this is good.
Nu kunnen ze massaal gegevens verzamelen.
Who's emailing whom, who's texting whom, who's doing Skype calls with whom. They're collecting a lot of information, a lot of content of phone calls. They're actually recording the voices, not for all of our calls, but for a lot of U.S. telephone calls. And they were doing this under an authority that had never existed before.
Generaal Hayden houdt alles zorgvuldig geheim. Er zijn maar een paar NSA-medewerkers op de hoogte van wat de president heeft goedgekeurd. De meesten weten van niets. Zelfs leidinggevenden zoals Thomas Drake niet.
My first day reporting on the job was the morning of 9/11.
He had been in the military. He'd been in the Air Force. He's devoted his life to national security issues. He's a computer genius of a sort.
Drake weet niet wat Hayden en het Witte Huis bekokstoofd hebben. Hij heeft een heel andere taak.
I was actually charged to find whatever you've got in the labs, whatever you've got in your agency. Even if it's not operational, put it into the fight. We need it. It might help us. We need to deal with the threat.
Drake weet niet beter of hij moet iets vinden wat de Amerikaanse privacy niet aantast. Hij begint te vroeten in de allergeheimste onderzoeksprogramma's van de NSA.
And he stumbles into sort of a skunk works, and he discovers that there was actually a program before 9/11 that could have, as they said, eavesdropped on the entire world. It's called Thin Thread.
Het is een programma dat enorme hoeveelheden telefoon- en e-mailgegevens kan opslaan en verwerken. Het is het werk van een veteraan van de cryptologie.
The whole idea was to build networks around the world of everybody and who they communicate with. Then you could isolate all the groups of terrorists. And once you could do that, you could use that metadata to select that information from all those tens of terabytes going by.
Maar Benny en zijn team hebben een beveiliging ingebouwd om te voorkomen dat de NSA Amerikaanse burgers kan bespioneren.
It anonymizes who it's listening in on unless there's a court warrant that makes the identity of that person clear.
If you knew that it was U.S. person related, it would be automatically encrypted. That was part of the design of Thin Thread.
It had a data privacy section. That was working very well, protecting citizens and innocent people by encrypting the data and not allowing analysts to look at it even.
Drake is in de wolken. Dit experimentele programma kan enorme hoeveelheden gegevens controleren zonder iemands privacy onnodig te schenden. Hij gaat ermee naar het hoogste echelon.
In those short days and weeks after 9/11, I put together a 2-page classified implementation plan to put Thin Thread into the fight, and I presented it to Maureen Baginski.
Baginski is zijn directe chef, de op 2 na hoogste in de NSA-hiërarchie.
It took a while to get any kind of response. He felt there was something strange going on.
She would refuse to see me. None of her responses were ever electronic. None of her responses were in a form that would be recorded or saved.
Finally, he wrote a memo, sent it to her, and instead of responding electronically, which would have been normal, she wrote in a big black felt pen.
It was kind of a modified cursive, and she said, they've gone with a different program.
When Drake asked her what this other solution was, she said, I'm sorry, I can't tell you.
Al snel duiken er aanwijzingen op dat er iets veel groters gaande is.
They started seeing stacks of servers piled in corners and so forth.
So we had to walk away around all this hardware that was piling up out there. And so we knew, something was happening.
All of a sudden, people who normally would communicate with each other were keeping secret this new operation of some sort.
Tientallen medewerkers moeten geheimhouding zweren. Maar al snel lekken er details naar Drake.
I had people coming to me with grave concerns about what are we doing, Tom? I thought we're supposed to have a warrant. I'm being directed to deploy what's normally foreign intelligence, outward-facing equipment. I'm being now directed to place it on internal networks.
Tegelijkertijd horen Bill Binney en zijn team dat de program hun Thin Thread gebruikt, maar zonder de privacybescherming.
What they're hearing is that the program they designed is in some form being put into use, but without the protections that they had designed in.
What they did was they got rid of the section of the code that encrypted any of the attributes of U.S. citizens.
Ed Loomis is voorstander van een hardere aanpak, maar dit vindt hij een stap te ver.
I just refused to believe, after all I had been through for 37 years, that all of a sudden things would change. and they'd go back to the old ways, back to the early 70s, I didn't believe that they could possibly have just flip-flopped and gone 180 degrees the other way. I just didn't believe it.
De FinThreat-ploeg vindt het verzamelen van gegevens zonder bevelschrift strijdig met alle regels.
All these years, having grown up, you never spy on Americans. We had suddenly become criminals by association. The agency had gone down a path that we had been preached to. You never do. We were very, very, very concerned.
Dat de program hun systeem gebruikt, is de druppel.
We said we can't stick around and be a party to this. We can't be an accessory to all these crimes, so we have to get out.
Eind oktober 2001 gaan Bill Binney, Kirk Wiebe en Ed Loomis met pensioen. Tom Drake blijft nog.
So Drake is now still working away over at the NSA with his worries rising about what's going on in terms of domestic surveillance.
Drake probeert het nog 1 keer bij Baginski.
I made one final attempt, one final appeal to Maureen Baginski, and she demurred, and she simply said, call the Office of General Counsel, which I did. And I said, I want to speak to the lead attorney. She'd give me the name. I want to speak. It was Vito Potenza.
He goes to the General Counsel's office with his concerns and says, I think this program may be illegal.
As he proceeded to tell me, you don't understand. All the lawyers have approved it. It's legal. We are under emergency conditions. Extraordinary means are required to deal with a threat. We just need the data. And then the most chilling, I know often have said this part of the conversation, don't ask any more questions, Mr. Drake.
If he came to me, someone who was not read into the program, right, and not a part of what we were doing, and told me that we were running amok, essentially, and violating the Constitution, and it was in that time frame when there was an awful lot going on and we were all worried about the next attack. There's no doubt in my mind I would have told him, you know, go talk to your management. Don't bother me with this. I mean, the minute he said, if he did say, you're using this to violate the Constitution, I mean, I probably would have stopped the conversation at that point, quite frankly. So, I mean, if that's what he said, then anything after that I probably wasn't listening to anyway.
De program breidt zich steeds meer uit. De grootste telefoonmaatschappijen leveren nu in het geheim de belgegevens van miljoenen Amerikanen aan de NSA. Tom Drake komt niet verder bij de NSA. In de herfst doet Bill Binney iets buitengewoons. Hij klapt uit de school en stapt naar het congres.
The next move is to try to get some cooperation from Congress, from the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. And he finds an ally in Diane Rourke, who felt the same way.
Diana Rourke is een topambtenaar bij het congres.
I worked at the House Intelligence Committee for 17 years. And for the last 5 of those years, I had the NSA account for the Republican majority.
She's an interesting character. She's very conservative. She's a Republican. She is in oversight of the NSA, partly to make it powerful and also to keep it from wasting money.
Haar chef is Porter Goss, de machtige voorzitter van de Permanente Commissie voor Inlichtingendiensten.
Diane is the go-to girl on the House Permanent Select Committee on matters dealing with NSA. So she spent a fair amount of time at NSA. She knew personnel out there.
Binney en Rourke vinden het veiliger om niet in haar kantoor af te spreken.
Bill came to me at my house and told me that part of their system, their thin thread system, was being used for collection of domestic communications in a dragnet fashion, collection on everybody.
So Diane says they have gone rogue, you know? That was her point, that she thought they were gone rogue.
I was aghast. I was absolutely aghast because NSA had this, because this constituted a complete reversal of NSA policy.
Rourke is a very feisty woman. She was just certain that there was no way that this program was legal. And she said, and if the NSA officials are breaking the law, I am gonna fry them.
Rourke bestookt de leiders van de permanente commissie met dringende memo's.
Diane, very capable, so good that she pierced the veil of a program that she was not briefed on, not cleared for, but knew something was going on.
I updated them on what was going on, explained to them all the technology in as simple a way as I could, and I argued very strongly that they needed to have the protections restored. I told them that if the administration refused to do this, they should insist that the system be killed, be stopped.
Rourke weet niet dat een kleine groep congresleiders al in oktober een geheime briefing in het Witte Huis heeft gekregen. Generaal Hayden heeft hen ingelicht.
Mike Hayden is particularly good at coming in and explaining things in a way that, shall we say, neophytes in the business could understand it. And you really wanted to believe what Mike had to say and absorb it and digest it rather than question it.
Very difficult circumstance.
He has very facile command of the facts. He's also very good at eliding past the parts that he doesn't think you want to hear and using very careful language to avoid saying things he doesn't want to say while also avoiding any outright falsehood.
Our purpose in this was to get the other political branch involved in this program. And so we would be defeating our own purposes, working it against our own goals if we weren't full Monty to these folks.
De staf van Cheney heeft wel strikte regels opgesteld voor de openheid van Hayden.
You have the individual senator or member of Congress who's brought in and read into a program. They're not allowed to bring any staff with them. They're not necessarily allowed to communicate any of what they've heard to their staff. In some instances, they're not lawyers, so they may not understand all of the legal fine points. In most instances, they're not technologists, so they may not be able to grasp what it is precisely that they're being briefed on or the implications of it.
14 people were killed and scores were wounded.
Na de briefing hebben sommigen het gevoel dat ze zo niet voldoende toezicht op dit programma kunnen houden. In de zomer van 2002 draait het op volle toeren.
And I argued with everybody that I met, and I got no refutation from them. I said it was unethical, immoral, politically stupid, illegal, and unconstitutional. And stop. And when this comes out, all hell is going to break loose.
Voorzitter Porter Goss vindt het nu welletjes.
I said, you need to talk to General Hayden, and you also need to know that concerns of the areas you're talking about are known to me, and I'm not going to discuss because you're frankly not cleared for this level of program or what's going on here. But the fact that you've discovered this means that you need to talk to General Hayden.
Rourke gaat naar Hayden om eindelijk antwoorden te krijgen.
My whole point in going there was to ask him why he had taken off the protections, the encryption and the automated tracking. I asked this any number of times, and he always evaded answering. And I finally just decided I was not going to leave the room until I got an answer. And so I kept asking. And so about the fifth time, he looked down, and I remember he could not look me in the eye. And he said, "We have the power. We don't need them." And he made clear that the power he's referring to was the Commander-in-Chief's wartime authority.
it's awkward for me having the conversation because she's not been briefed on the program. All right, so to a certain level of detail, I simply respond that I disagree with both of her conclusions. That I think what we're doing is lawful, and I think what it is we're doing is effective. And if I knew of a better way of doing it, I would do that too.
Toward the end of the meeting, General Hayden made it pretty clear that he wanted me to stop lobbying against the program.
I said, look, and Diane, this is going to become public. And when it becomes public, you can argue your point and I can argue mine.
And so instead of allaying my concerns, this actually made me far more worried. It was clear to me that he didn't like my talking to other people in the executive branch and on the House Intelligence Committee and trying to convince them to put controls on the program.
Haydens geheim is veilig. Voorlopig. In 2003 wordt de geheimhouding een stuk moeilijker. Dan begint Thomas Tam aan een nieuwe baan bij het departement van Justitie.
I went in with a lot of patriotic fervor. I work with agents, FBI agents primarily, to try and develop intelligence about people that we thought were foreign agents or terrorists.
He came from a family of FBI agents, but not just any FBI agents. His uncle was one of the top aides to J. Edgar Hoover. His father had also been a senior official under J. Edgar Hoover.
Tam begint bij een ultrageheim instituut, het Hof van Toezicht op Geheime Diensten voor het Buitenland, het FISA Court.
It was in on the 6th floor, and only one elevator went up there. And it was literally in a bank vault because they were worried about the Soviet Union, overhearing what was going on.
Good evening. President Nixon reportedly will announce his resignation tonight. And Vice President...
Het FISA Court functioneert al als waakhond sinds de ontdekking dat de NSA onder Nixon Amerikanen bespioneerd heeft.
When that came out, you saw a period of reform like none other we'd seen, like nothing we'd seen before then, and frankly nothing since.
De hervorming houdt in dat de NSA een machtiging van het FISA-court nodig heeft om in eigen land mensen te observeren.
You can turn your ears outward, but not inward. You can listen all you want abroad, but you really cannot do that to Americans unless you have a warrant.
En de man die machtigingen voor het FISA-court voorbereidt is nu Thomas Tam.
The law specifically said that if you didn't go through the court, you were committing a federal felony.
Als Tam terrorismezaken doorneemt, stoot hij op iets verrassends. Aanwijzingen voor het bestaan van de program.
There are references to wiretaps and information that hadn't come through FISA warrants. So the question is, where did they come from? Where did the government get this information?
Hij ontdekt dat bijna niemand bij justitie het fijne van de zaak weet.
I asked a supervisor of mine if she knew what the program was about, and she told me that she just assumed that what we were doing was illegal, and she didn't want to ask any questions.
Tam is ongerust.
They were conducting electronic surveillance without getting warrants, and using that information then to develop probable cause and basically not informing the court of the source of the information.
Tam en anderen bij justitie die het geheime presidentiële bevel niet kennen, vragen zich af of hun minister Ashcroft met iets onwettelijks bezig is.
It just kind of ate away at me and kind of came to a head when I ran into one of the deputies of the unit who said that there was a chance that for the first time ever that a sitting attorney general would be indicted.
Tam krijgt bij zijn bazen geen antwoord op zijn vragen.
He was quite disturbed by that. Was quite disturbed that he wasn't getting answers to the questions he was asking.
Uiteindelijk neemt Tam een riskant besluit. Hij rijdt over de Pennsylvania Avenue naar een geheime afspraak met een machtig staflid van de Senaat.
I said, does Congress know what we're doing with regard to this program? And she said she couldn't tell me. I said, well, then I think, maybe I will go to the press. And I remember her last comment was, Tom, whistleblowers frequently don't end up very well. And I told her, yeah, I understood that.
In Baghdad, a bomb last night set portions.
In de herfst van 2003 zoekt het Witte Huis iemand voor een vacature bij justitie.
The Justice Department needs a new head of the Office of Legal Counsel, which is a very powerful position. Cheney and Addington get together and say, who should we pick?
David Addington heeft een kandidaat op het oog. Jack Goldsmith.
Jack Goldsmith is impeccably credentialed, member of the Federalist Society, is well known and liked in the conservative movement. David Addington calls Goldsmith in and interrogates him about a few of his lesser known positions and what would you think about this or that, and he's convinced Goldsmith, like he himself, is a true believer and is going to be making the right decisions.
Met Addington's zegen wordt Goldsmith het nieuwe hoofd van het Bureau voor Rechtsadvies, dat erop toeziet of geheime regeringsbesluiten wel wettig zijn.
I was being briefed into a lot of programs, classified programs, counterterrorism programs. I was extraordinarily naive. I had a sense that this was an important job. I did not have a full sense of the nature of the issues or the pace.
Al snel gaat Goldsmith langs bij Addington. Nu zal ook hij worden ingewijd in the program.
Jack, like most of the others who are briefed on this, walks into Addington's office, which he regards as a little bit peculiar. What's this doing in Vice President's lawyer's office? Addington opens the safe, pulls it out. There's the red cover. It says top secret /SI/comment /stellar win, the cover name for this program.
Goldsmith leest het document met groeiende twijfel.
The program was an example of the administration going it alone, in secret, based on inadequate legal reasoning and flawed legal opinions.
Goldsmith ontdekt dat de regering gegevens heeft verzameld over de e-mails van tientallen miljoenen Amerikanen.
He said you can't justify the email collection. It is on its face a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment and perhaps the First Amendment as well.
Addington is razend over Goldsmith's twijfels en laat dat duidelijk merken.
He was very tough in making his arguments. He was very sarcastic and aggressive against people with whom he disagreed and dismissive oftentimes. And he acted with the implicit blessing of the Vice President. So all of these things made him a very, very forceful presence.
Yeah, David pushed. He pushed everybody. He pushed me. Even when I was the Attorney General, he would push me. So that was just David's nature. And I think Jack didn't appreciate being pushed sometimes.
He was daring Jack Goldsmith to say, this is illegal and you've got to stop it. He never believed that Goldsmith would do it.
Goldsmith tells him we're going to pull back our endorsement of the legality of this program. And Addington roars at him and says, if you do that, the blood of 100,000 people killed in the next attack will be on your head.
Voor Cheney, Addington, Gonzales, Hayden en anderen staat er meer op het spel dan alleen een carrière.
It was a felony to conduct this kind of surveillance in the United States, and everyone was relying on the shield that they were trying to create of having the president order it explicitly and have the attorney general sign off and say it's lawful. And as soon as the Justice Department starts to say we're not so sure this is lawful, there is a great deal of concern and anxiety.
5 separate car bombs blew up in a span of 45 minutes.
Justitie bereidt zich voor op een conflict met het Witte Huis. De baas van Goldsmith, staatssecretaris James Comey, brengt John Ashcroft het nieuws. De program is voor een deel onwettig.
They go to the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, they say, we don't think this is legal. We think we need to get this changed, or we need to stop what's going on because we don't have a solid foundation to go on.
Ashcroft ondertekent al 2,5 jaar trouw om de 45 dagen een nieuwe machtiging voor het hele programma. Maar deze keer stribbelt hij tegen.
Ashcroft gives Comey his verbal assurance that he is not going to go along with this program and that he is going to demand changes or he won't sign.
De confrontatie met het Witte Huis is nu een feit. De program wordt stilgelegd. Voorlopig toch.
Geef toe, het enige verschil met een goede politieke fictiereeks is dat er in onze reeks geen seks voorkomt. Maar wat nu met dat geheime programma? Gaat het de kast in omdat het onwettelijk is? Of doet de NSA er gewoon mee verder? Dat ziet u volgende week in deel 2. Niet op donderdag, want dan is het voetbal, maar wel op vrijdag om 2 uur of op zondag om 6 uur op Canvas. Deel 2 begint in 2004 in Madrid. Graag tot volgende week.
In Madrid this morning, more than 190 people were killed.
After at least 10 simultaneous bomb blasts.
Given that starkness of the Al-Qaeda threat, given the ambiguity of the situation, I thought the correct operational, legal, and ethical decision was, all right, we'll do this one more time on the somewhat different framework.